So, what we're going to talk about today is going to be really important to the work that you're going to be doing. We're going to discuss the purpose of documentation, some of the legal guidelines that go beyond that, and what principles and responsibilities do you have as an upcoming nurse. Now, when we think about our patient records, we think about communication, diagnostic tests and orders that we may see, the care plan that we're going to do. We can even go beyond that to think about the quality process and performance improvement, along with research, education. What about credentialing, regulations, and legislation? Reimbursement is also included, along with legal and historical documentation. Now, when we think about what effective documentation is, it is about being consistent with the standards or regulations set, especially by the agency that you work at, but also making sure that your information is accurate, making sure that it has facts, lean away from giving your own opinion, making sure that it's not only organized, but it's done in a timely fashion. And if there's a timestamp to go with it, including that, along with making sure that you're thinking about the legal obligation that you have, but and at the same time maintaining confidentiality. So the most important thing that I can give you is that if it wasn't documented, then you might as well have not done it at all. Because as far as there's a legal standpoint is concerned, it really wasn't done. So what do you want to do? One, you want to make sure that when you're documenting that you're giving content and context, making sure that you're considering timing, include your format, the accountability of yourself or to the individual that you assigned it to, and the confidentiality of the patient. When we document as nurses, we document on a 24-hour cycle. That's that military clock. And I think that's something important for you to understand how that works. I would definitely look that information up and get used to using that 24-hour cycle. Now, we talk about confidentiality. Remember that all information that pertains to our patients, whether it be written on paper, spoken out aloud, or if it's on our computers, that information is considered to be confidential. We keep confidential any information that's about the patient name, their addresses, social security numbers, any type of number associated with them. If there is information about why they are sick, treatment, or information from their past medical treatment, we have a legal an ethical responsibility to keep their information confidential. Only staff who are directly involved in the client's care have a legitimate access to a patient's records. So, what would you think if a nurse fails to log off of her computer before walking away and she just got finished documenting care? Is this a breach of your patient's confidentiality? What do you think? Well, if you said it's true, you are correct. And the reason being is that a nurse who fails to log off breaches that confidentiality by exposing their information to any passerby who may be present. So we talk about breaching confidentiality. What are other ways that breaches in confidentiality can happen? It could be through displaying information on a public screen, sending email messages via a public network or unsecured network. It could be sharing printers amongst units with different functions and that may allow them to have access to information that they should not. Discarding copies of information in a trash can instead of using the confidentiality bins. If we're having a conversation that can be overheard by others, if we are um, faxing information to unauthorized individuals or sending messages over pagers, especially sound systems, that can be a breach in a patient's confidentiality. Privacy and confidentiality is protected by laws, including the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, also known as HIPAA, and it was passed to help protect that privacy of health information. We again, have that responsibility to keep information about our clients confidential. Again, only staff directly involved in that specific patient's care can have legitimate access to their records. When it comes to patient rights, we have a responsibility to make sure that we are ensuring that the patient's rights are that they're not only given to them, but we have a right to help uphold them. So, in order to uphold their rights, you got to know what those rights are. So, patients have the right to see copies of their health records. They may have to fill out forms in order to receive so, but they cannot be denied. They have a right to update their health records, get a list of any disclosures. They can request restrictions on how that information is disclosed, and they can choose how to receive that health information. There are policies related to um, verbal orders when we have emergencies. So we still have to be cautious though. When we're recording their information, when we're reading back, when we're engaging in any verbal conversations, we have to not only be cautious of those who are present around us, making sure that they have a right to that information, or to create a private space in order to have that verbal conversation. But at the same time, we also want to make sure that we're being accurate in our documentation to take not only note of the date and time that it's issued, but also who the physician is who's ordering it and what your names and initial are. And I can tell you though that even though you're going to find that there are some facilities in an emergency situation that receive where nurses receive verbal orders, a lot of facilities are decreasing how often that happens. And so make sure that you're following your facility's policies and whether or not they do or do not take verbal orders. Majority of the time in emergencies, you may see that, but it's not a standard practice on your unit. When you think about verbal orders, make sure that you understand that they have to be reviewed by a physician. Again, as I mentioned, in most facilities, nurses no longer take verbal orders. Doctors have to be present. They have to be responsible for putting in their information. However, again, there may be facilities out there that do allow physicians to place verbal orders or to allow a nurse to go in and document a verbal order and to be reviewed by the physician. So remember that a physician still has to review the orders for accuracy. They have to sign off on them, and they also have to make sure that they put their date, time, and stamp on when that order is signed. Without a signed order or recognition from the doctor, then the instructions or the orders cannot be carried out. When you are receiving a telephone order, make sure that you are recording the orders within the medical record. Make sure you read back to the practitioner to verify the accuracy of it, the date and time that the order was received, and then record that telephone order, the full name and title of the physician or the nurse practitioner who issued that order, and then sign the order with your name and title as the person who is transcribing that information. When we record data, data has so many purposes that includes not only the facilitation of the care that the patient receives, but it also serves as a financial and legal record to your patient's stay at the facility. It helps with research as well, but also supports sometimes decisional decisions based on the analysis of the data that has been recorded. When it comes to personal health records, there are two kinds. You have the ones that stand alone, and so the patients fill in the information from their own records, and then the information is stored in the computer or an internet. And then you have the ones that are connected to that connects the health records of your patients together, and that is linked through which you will see more common an electronic health record system, and that electronic health record system is something that can be maintained as one set of records with one particular office or entity, or it can be a collective electronic health record that is made accessible to multiple doctors. The benefit of health information and that exchange of information is very vital because it provides a source of transportation of information to help improve not only quality but also safety of the patient care. It gives a basic level of operations among your EHR, and it allows it to be maintained not only by the physicians but by the organization. It stimulates education, but also your patient's involvement in their own healthcare. It is instrumental in helping individuals meet the commitment that we have to the community. Creates a way for feedback to happen, especially when it comes to research or actual practice, and it helps facilitates quick movement, especially within technology and healthcare services, deployment of needing those. It kind of supports innovation as well, in investing in material that may be needed in order to improve patients' care. Ways that we can document information, these methods, it can be within the source record, they can be problem oriented. We could document problems, interventions, evaluations, and that's the pie charting. We can make our charting more focused. We can chart by section, which is what you'll see more so in your hospitals. And then within case management, you will see a model as well. And then you have your computerized documentation through your electronic health records or EHRs. When we are documenting, we want to make sure that we be mindful of different formats that can be used. One, you have your initial nursing assessment, your care plans, or other ways where you give your patient care summary. If there's a critical collaborative piece that has come together that you need to document, you'll put that in there. Progress notes is another way to document. Within your facility, there may be flow sheets and graphic records, along with medication records, acuity records, discharge and transfer information, and long-term care documentation. When you think about flow sheets, again, flow sheets can help collect information that can be graphically seen to see your trends, look at 24-hour fluid balance, look at medication records, and also just, again, have a 24-hour look at what has gone on with your patient, or if it's necessary for acuity charting. A hands-off communication, that's going to be your IS bar. That is when you are looking at your identifying the patient, making an introduction, what's going on with the patient right now. You're going to identify yourself, identify the patient, and then you're going to state the problems concisely. Then when you get to your and that's more of your situation. So kind of we cover that. So you have your identity, then you have your situation, and then in your background, you're going to talk about the background of the patient. I mean, how did we get to the point where we are? We may review information that comes from their chart. We may anticipate any questions that they may have and state any relevant medical issues. When we get to your assessment, what do you think the issue is and why are you concerned? And then give your observations and evaluations of the patient current status. In your recommendation, what should we do to respond to the situation? Make suggestions that should be done to meet the patient's immediate needs. And then the read back of the order and response allows for collaboration as a result of a plan of action. So listen for any feedback to help ensure that there's an understanding of what's happening with your patient. So I'll give you an example. You are using an IS bar, which is part of the reporting system at the facility where you are, and your patient is deteriorating. The patient has been on morphine. They have a PCA pump for pain related to a diagnosis of cancer. Which of the following, or place the following nursing statements related to this call in the correct IS bar order? So there's 6 of them. And in this particular case, the statement is, I'm calling about Mr. Sanchez in room 202 was receiving morphine via PCA pump for pancreatic cancer. The second statement is Mr. Sanchez has been difficult to arouse and his mental status has changed over the past 12 hours since using the pump. 3, you want me to discontinue the PCA pump until you see him tonight at patient rounds? The next one, I am Rosa Clark, an RN working on the second floor of South Street Hospital. 5, Mr. Sanchez was admitted 2 days ago following a diagnosis of pancreatic cancer. Or 6, I think the dosage of morphine in Mr. Sanchez's PCA pump needs to be lowered. So in this order, it would be that I would identify myself first. I am Rosa Clark, an RN working on the second floor of South Street Hospital. Next, I would state why I'm calling. I'm calling about Mr. Sanchez in room 202, who's receiving morphine via PCA pump for pancreatic cancer. Next, I will say Mr. Sanchez was admitted 2 days ago following a diagnosis of pancreatic cancer. Then I would go into Mr. Sanchez has been difficult to arouse and his mental status has changed over the past 12 hours since using the PCA pump. Then I would say I think the doses of morphine and Mr. Sanchez PCA pump needs to be lowered. And then I think I would end with you want me to discontinue the PCA pump until you see him tonight at patient's rounds. And what I've done is I've identified myself, I've identified the patient, and gave them a reminder of what's going on. Then I would state what the problem has been and the current status of the patient. I've also stated what they were admitted for. So I've given a lot of information there. And then I've restated the instructions that I've been given to confirm. And that's kind of a little bit how that goes. And I know that might be hard when you're listening to an audio. But if you get an opportunity, take some time to look at an IRS bar and to get really familiar with identifying and introducing yourself, then looking at what the situation is, give some background information. What was your assessment? What are you recommending? And then reading back any instructions that are being given to you. All right. Now, when you go to give your change of shift report or the handoff report, one of the things that I'm going to tell you is sometimes nurses don't want to do bedside report, but I promise you it's for the benefit of assuring that you don't get left with a responsibility of something that someone may have forgotten that they did not do. And when it's very serious, you don't want to be the person who's documenting something that you yourself did not do. So it is best to do bedside report so that you can validate, but also that the patient can also validate. So, but when you're giving that shift report, you want to make sure that you're identifying information about each of your patients, giving appraisal for their status, including changes in any status that happens during your shift. And make sure that you give pertinent monitorings or labs or radiology data that you collected that day. And if there's any abnormal findings within your physical head to toe assessment, you want to make sure that you give that. If there's a pain level or pain medication that has been prescribed, ordered for, if there's a pain management treatment that we're using or needs, make sure that that has gone over. Any current orders that may be coming into play or current orders that will not start until that shift. Any abnormal occurrences, if there's any unfilled orders, making sure that you're passing that on to the next shift, that information. Try not to pass on information or unfilled orders that should have happened during your time. If there were patient family questions or concerns that need to be addressed, or any reports on patients as far as doing transfer or discharge, that should be given. Now, when we're thinking about telephone reports, again, make sure you identify yourself and the patient and the relationship that you have. Make sure that your reports are concise and accurate about the change of condition. Sometimes telephone reports happen either because you're transferring them or discharging them to another facility. And then sometimes you'll get those transfer calls. And so you get an idea of also information that you're looking for. You want to have a current set of vital signs and clinical manifestations. Then you want to make sure that you have the patient's record at hand just in case there are questions that may come from the nurse or come from the physician itself. And then record the time and date of that call, what was communicated, and if there was any responses by the nurse or the physician. Incident reports are often necessary to collect whether or not there were errors, breakdown in communication. It's used as a quality report, but incident reports are filled out based on your facility's policies. When you are conferring with interdisciplinary individuals for care, understand that during this part, consultations are happening, referrals are happening, um, and it's an opportunity for information to be shared from the nursing's perspective. It's also your care round as well. The benefits that may come from informatics result in accuracy and completeness of your documentation. It's going to increase that. It's going to improve workflow, and also it can remove any redundant documentation. It can also help facilitate, again, the analysis of clinical data that can also result in your unit being able to request needs that you may have. So if there's an equipment or a device that you need on your unit, that information can be used to validate that. All right. So what have you learned today? There are so many things that I think that I wanted you to get from this piece. And I think if I could think of anything, just remember the big picture, that documentation is your way of communicating. It's a legal protection for you. It allows you to justify what your clinical judgment was for that patient, but also allows you to maintain your patient safety. It is not busy work. This is what nursing is. So ask yourself, would you be comfortable defending your documentation in court? Does your chart tell the full story of what happened in the care that you provided your patient? And if another nurse was to read your notes, can they safely continue the care that they're picking up from you at the end of your shift? Well, if during this episode you caught yourself thinking about how important your documentation is, and if you learned anything, then congratulations, you've done an awesome job. That means you're growing. That means you're developing clinical judgment if you're thinking upon this information and figuring out how you can apply it. And let me tell you, when you do this, that's what separates individuals from being a student nurse to thinking like a nurse. So, thanks a lot for joining us. This is RNE's Nursing Made Easy. Because you are the nurse, let's start thinking like one.